The crystalline spires of Nexus Station pierced the void like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 different suns. Rylan Nash stood at the viewport of his small ship, the Stellar Dawn, watching as repair drones swarmed around his vessel's damaged quantum drive. The diagnostic readout confirmed what he already knew: the repairs would cost more than he had earned in the last 3 jobs combined. Well, he muttered, running a hand through his auburn hair, this is going to be interesting. The station's automated traffic control had directed him to dock in the lower levels, where the more questionable elements of galactic society conducted their business. It wasn't his preferred location, but beggars couldn't be choosers. As he made his way through the crowded corridors, various alien species gave him curious looks. Humans were still relatively rare in this sector, and Rylan's height and build marked him as someone who spent more time in gravity wells than space stations. His weathered jacket bore the patches of a dozen different engineering guilds, each one representing a certification in quantum mechanics and engineering. The Crimson Nexus Lounge was exactly the kind of establishment he'd been warned about, a place where fortunes were made and lost over games of chance and carefully worded agreements. The doorway was guarded by 2 Varaxian sentries, their crystalline exoskeletons glinting under the ambient lighting. "I'm here to see Baron Vanther," Rylan stated, keeping his voice steady. The guards exchanged glances, their faceted eyes reflecting different wavelengths of light as they communicated silently. After a moment, they stepped aside. The interior was a testament to excess, with holographic displays showing real-time market data from across the galaxy while patrons from dozens of species conducted their business in private booths. At the center of it all sat Crix Vanther, one of the most powerful trade barons in the sector. The alien's iridescent scales shifted colors as he turned to regard Rylan, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Ah, the human engineer. I've heard interesting things about your work with quantum systems." His voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a storm. Beside him sat his daughter, Naira. Where her father's scales were a riot of colors, hers were a deep, midnight blue that seemed to absorb light. She regarded Rylan with obvious curiosity, her silver eyes lacking the disdain he usually saw from members of the older spacefaring races. "I need a loan," Rylan stated directly. "My quantum drive dash." "Boring," Crix interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "Everyone needs something. The question is, what makes you interesting?" He leaned forward, his scales rippling with amusement. "I've heard humans have an unusual talent for quantum mechanics. Something about your species' primitive brains being better suited to understanding probability paradoxes." Rylan bit back a retort. He needed this loan, and arguing about human cognitive capabilities wouldn't help. "We have our moments." "Indeed." Crix's eyes all focused on him simultaneously, a sign of intense interest in his species. "Perhaps we can arrange something more entertaining than a simple loan. A wager, if you will." Naira shifted in her seat, her scales darkening slightly, a sign of concern or embarrassment, Rylan wasn't sure which. "Father." "The central bank's quantum vault," Crix continued, ignoring his daughter's protest. "It's supposed to be impenetrable. 3 different species helped design its security systems. If you can breach it and retrieve a specific data crystal." He paused for dramatic effect. "I'll not only pay for your repairs, I'll give you my daughter's hand in marriage." The lounge fell silent, conversations dying midward as patrons turned to stare. Naira's scales had turned almost black with emotion, but Rylan noticed she was watching him intently, waiting for his response. "And if I fail?" he asked, already knowing he shouldn't be considering this insane proposal. Crix's scales rippled with colors Rylan had never seen before. "Then you'll work for me, maintaining my fleet's quantum drives until your debt is paid. Say, 10 years? It was a trap, obviously. The vault was supposed to be unbreakable, and Crix probably had ulterior motives for wanting someone to attempt a breach. The marriage offer was clearly meant as a joke, a way to humiliate the presumptuous human who dared ask for help. But as Rylan looked at Naira, he saw something in her silver eyes, a challenge, perhaps, or a hope. And he had always been too curious for his own good when it came to quantum systems. 3 days, he said finally. I'll need 3 days to analyze the vault's security. Crix's laughter filled the lounge, a sound like breaking glass. The human accepts. Witness this, all of you. Either we'll see the impossible, or I'll gain a very skilled engineer for my fleet. As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Rylan caught Naira's gaze again. Her scales had lightened slightly, showing bands of deep blue that seemed to pulse with an internal light. She gave him the slightest nod, and in that moment, he knew there was more to this wager than her father's apparent joke. The game was on, and Rylan Nash was about to show this station exactly what human quantum engineers could do. The central bank's quantum vault loomed before Rylan like a monolith of impossibility. From his observation point in a nearby maintenance corridor, he could see the security systems at work, layers of quantum encryption that shifted and flowed like living things. Most engineers would have seen an impenetrable wall. Rylan saw a dance waiting to be joined. Interesting approach. The voice behind him made him jump. Naira emerged from the shadows, her midnight blue scales almost invisible in the dim light. Most would try to gather intel from the outside. You're the first to start from within the maintenance systems. Rylan kept his eyes on his quantum scanner, trying to ignore how the station's artificial lighting played across her scales. Your father know you're here? My father, she said, settling beside him with fluid grace, thinks he's very clever. He doesn't realize that sometimes his jokes have unexpected punchlines. She reached past him to adjust his scanner's settings, her arm brushing his. The vault's quantum matrix has a peculiar rhythm to it. Almost like music, Rylan finished, watching the patterns flow across his display. 3/4 time, with a syncopated beat every 7th measure. Someone encoded their cultural heritage into the security protocols. Naira's scales shifted to a lighter shade of blue, showing her surprise. You can see that? Most species need specialized equipment to detect quantum harmonics. Humans have a knack for patterns, he replied, making some adjustments to his equipment. Especially the ones we're not supposed to see. Your father mentioned something about our primitive brains. Father has many opinions about younger species, Naira said, her scales rippling with what might have been amusement. He also believes quantum mechanics should be left to the elder races. Yet here you are, reading quantum harmonics like sheet music. Rylan turned to face her, struck by the intensity in her silver eyes. Why are you helping me? This can't just be about proving your father wrong. Perhaps I'm curious, she said, leaning closer. About humans, about quantum mechanics, about what happens when someone finally challenges the established order of things. Her scales shifted through shades of blue that seemed to mirror the quantum patterns they were studying. Or perhaps I'm tired of being treated like a prize to be wagered. I never saw you as a prize, Rylan admitted. More like a quantum equation, complex, beautiful, and probably dangerous to understand too quickly. Her laughter was like the chiming of crystal bells. Careful, human. Talk like that might make me think you're actually interested in winning this bet, not just accessing the vault. Before Rylan could respond, his scanner chimed. The quantum patterns had shifted, revealing something in their depths. There, he said, pointing to the display. See how the harmony breaks every 3rd rotation? That's not a flaw in the security, it's a maintenance protocol. The vault needs to periodically realign its quantum states. Naira studied the pattern, her eyes widening. And during that realignment, the quantum harmonics are vulnerable, Rylan finished. Not enough for a brute force attack, but if someone were to introduce a complementary frequency. He began programming his scanner, fingers dancing across the holographic interface. A quantum resonance cascade, Naira breathed, watching his work. Elegant. But the timing would have to be perfect. A microsecond too early or late. Then I'll just have to ask this quantum system for a dance, Rylan said, double-checking his calculations. And hope I don't step on its toes. Naira's scales shifted to a deep, rich blue he hadn't seen before. You're either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. She stood with that liquid grace that seemed unique to her species. The next maintenance cycle is in 6 hours. I can ensure the secondary security monitors are distracted. Why do I get the feeling you've been planning something like this for a while? Her silver eyes gleamed. Let's just say my father isn't the only one who can play games. Be ready at 0300 station time. And Rylan? She paused at the corridor's entrance. Try not to die. It would be disappointing to lose such an interesting dance partner. As she disappeared into the shadows, Rylan returned to his quantum calculations. The security system's rhythm pulsed on his scanner, complex and beautiful. Just like Naira. He had a feeling that her father's joke was about to backfire spectacularly, assuming he survived the next 6 hours. The quantum harmonics continued their endless dance, waiting for him to make his move. One way or another, this station was about to learn why humans had earned their reputation for doing the impossible. Lord Xeris of House Xerith stood before the central bank's quantum vault, his crystalline exoskeleton radiating barely contained fury. The security feeds showed what should have been impossible, quantum harmonics shifting in perfect synchronization with an external signal. A human signal. Explain, he demanded, his voice crackling with subsonic frequencies that made the nearby console screens flicker. How has this primitive species penetrated our most sacred technology? The bank's security chief, a nervous Varaxian, gestured at the displays with trembling appendages. The human isn't actually breaking through the security, my lord. He's dancing with it. Those patterns shouldn't be possible for a non-elder race to even perceive, let alone manipulate. In the maintenance corridor, oblivious to the growing crisis above, Rylan continued his work. His quantum scanner hummed in harmony with the vault's security systems, each adjustment bringing him closer to his goal. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he maintained the delicate resonance. Your technique is impressive, Naira said from her position at the corridor junction, where she monitored the station's security feeds. Father's contacts in the bank are already sending him footage. I haven't seen his scales shift to that particular shade of disbelief in decades. Rylan allowed himself a small smile, never taking his eyes off the quantum harmonics. Glad I could provide some entertainment. Though I get the feeling not everyone is enjoying the show. As if on cue, Naira's scales darkened with concern. We have a problem. House Xeritha's delegation just entered the bank. Lord Xeris himself. I take it that's bad? House Xerith designed the original quantum locks for the elder races. They consider their technology sacred. The idea of a human manipulating it. She left the implications hanging. Rylan's fingers danced across his scanner's interface, maintaining the delicate quantum dance while making subtle adjustments. How long until they reach us? Minutes. Maybe less. Naira moved closer, her scales shifting through shades of midnight blue that seemed to mirror his own tension. We should abort. House Xerith has ended civilizations for lesser offenses against their pride. Can't stop now, Rylan said, his voice tight with concentration. The quantum resonance is already in motion. Disrupting it would trigger every security system in the vault. He glanced at her. Besides, I'm starting to think this was never really about the bet, was it? Before Naira could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor above. Lord Xeris's voice boomed through the maintenance level, amplified by his crystalline form. Show yourself, human. Your affront to the sacred harmonics ends now. Rylan kept working, his movements becoming faster, more precise. The quantum patterns on his scanner were approaching perfect synchronization. Your father knew this would happen, didn't he? He knew House Zirith would react this way to a human accessing their technology. Yes, Naira admitted, her scales rippling with complex emotions. But he didn't expect you to get this far. The bet was supposed to fail early, embarrassing both you and House Zirith. A simple political maneuver. Instead, I'm actually succeeding. Ryland's scanner chimed softly, the quantum harmonics were reaching their crescendo. And now everyone has to deal with the implications of a human mastering elder race technology. The maintenance corridor's security door exploded inward, revealing Lord Zirith in all his crystalline glory. The elder race noble towered over them, his exoskeleton refracting light in ways that hurt Ryland's eyes. Step away from the quantum interface, primitive. You cannot comprehend the forces you are meddling with. Ryland didn't look up from his work. Actually, Lord Zirith, I comprehend them perfectly. For instance, I understand that your quantum locks have a fundamental flaw, they assume all users think the same way you do. The noble's crystalline form vibrated with rage. Our technology is perfect. Refined over millennia. Perfect for elder race minds, Ryland agreed, making one final adjustment. But humans? We see music where you see mathematics. We find harmony where you enforce rigid structure. The quantum scanner's display suddenly flared with brilliant patterns. We dance, when you would march. The vault's quantum harmonics shifted, transformed, and for a moment the maintenance corridor was filled with what could only be described as music, pure quantum frequencies combining in ways that should have been impossible. Lord Zirith staggered back, his crystalline form resonating with the unfamiliar patterns. What have you done?" the noble demanded, his voice losing its commanding tone. Naira's scales had shifted to a blue so deep it seemed to absorb light. "He's shown us that the universe is larger than our assumptions," she said, moving to stand beside Ryland. "And that pride comes before the fall." The vault door slid open silently, revealing its secrets. But Ryland knew this was only the beginning. He had just challenged the established order of the galaxy, armed with nothing but human ingenuity and a different way of seeing the quantum world. And somewhere in the station above, a trade baron's joke was about to become something far more significant than anyone had imagined. In the depths of Nexus Station's private quantum research lab, Ryland examined the data crystal he'd retrieved from the vault. Its faceted surface caught the light like trapped stars, but it was the information within that truly sparkled. Beside him, Naira's scales shifted through shades of blue that matched the quantum displays surrounding them. "This isn't just financial data," she said, her silver eyes wide as she processed the information. "These are quantum encryption protocols. The foundation of elder race technology. And the proof of their exploitation," Ryland added, manipulating the holographic interface with practiced ease. "Every backdoor, every hidden access point they built into the systems they sold to younger races. Your father knew this was here, didn't he?" Naira's scales darkened momentarily. He suspected. House Ziritha's influence over galactic commerce always seemed too perfect, too absolute. But proving it. She turned to face him. No one was ever supposed to access their quantum locks, let alone understand them well enough to expose their secrets. Until a primitive human came along and asked them for a dance. Ryland's fingers moved across the interface, extracting and cataloging the crystal's contents. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Before Naira could respond, the lab's security systems chimed a warning. Multiple approaching signatures, moving with purpose. Her scales rippled with alarm. House Zirith isn't known for accepting defeat gracefully. They'll try to seize the crystal, destroy the evidence, and us with it. Ryland didn't pause in his work. They're not the only ones who can manipulate quantum states. His hands flew across the interface, implementing protocols that would have made elder race engineers blanch. Help me set up a quantum entanglement field. If we can't protect the data, we can at least make sure everyone sees it. Understanding dawned in Naira's silver eyes. She moved to a second console, her movements perfectly synchronized with his. A quantum broadcast? Through the station's communication network? Better. Rylan grinned as their systems came online. We're going to entangle the data with every quantum-capable device in the sector. Once it's quantum-locked with enough systems, there's no way to erase it without destroying half the galaxy's communication infrastructure. The lab's door reverberated with a heavy impact. Lord Xeris's voice boomed through the reinforced material. Your interference in matters beyond your comprehension ends now, human. Surrender the crystal and submit to justice. Naira's scales shifted to a shade of blue Rylan hadn't seen before, determination mixed with something deeper, more personal. They still don't understand, do they? That this was never about comprehension. It was about perspective. Elder races see quantum mechanics as a tool to control, Rylan said, initiating the entanglement sequence. Humans see it as a partner to dance with. And now, the quantum displays erupted with cascading patterns as the data began spreading through the network. Now everyone gets to see the dance. The door's quantum locks began to fail under House Xeritha's assault. But it was already too late. The crystal's contents were propagating through the quantum network, each bit of data finding resonance with systems across the sector. Trade records, secret protocols, hidden backdoors, all becoming permanently entangled with the fabric of galactic communications. Your father's joke just changed everything, Rylan said, watching the data flow. The elder races can't maintain their technological superiority if everyone knows how their systems really work. Naira moved closer, her scales now shimmering with that deep, midnight blue that seemed reserved for moments of intense emotion. Father always said the best jokes contain truth. But I don't think even he expected this level of revelation. She turned to face him fully. Or this level of attraction. The quantum displays cast ethereal patterns across her scales, making them seem to dance with inner light. Rylan found himself reaching out to trace one of the shifting patterns, his fingers gentle against her exotic skin. Is this attraction quantum entanglement too? Once connected, forever influenced by each other regardless of distance? A human understanding of quantum mechanics and elder race biology? Her silver eyes sparkled with amusement and something more intense. How terrifyingly efficient you are at dismantling our assumptions. The lab door's final quantum lock failed with a resonant boom. But in the moment before chaos erupted into their sanctuary, Rylan and Naira shared a look that contained more meaning than any quantum encryption. They had changed the galaxy's balance of power, exposed centuries of elder race manipulation, and found something neither of them had expected. As House Xeritha's forces burst into the lab, they found the human and the trade baron's daughter standing together, surrounded by quantum displays showing truth cascading across the galaxy. The joke had become a revolution, and the punchline was still unfolding. Lord Xeris's crystalline form vibrated with fury as he surveyed the scene. What have you done? Rylan's hand found Naira's, their fingers intertwining as naturally as quantum particles finding resonance. We invited the galaxy to dance, he said simply. And it turns out everyone was just waiting for the right song. The Crimson Nexus Lounge had never been so crowded. Representatives from every spacefaring race in the sector packed the venue, their attention fixed on the central table where Trade Baron Crix Vanther sat with his characteristic smirk. The quantum displays above showed the continuing cascade of revelations spreading through the galactic networks, each new discovery sending fresh waves of murmurs through the assembled crowd. Lord Xeris stood before them, his crystalline form dimmed with what might have been shame or rage. This breach of elder race protocols cannot be allowed to stand. The human has violated our most sacred technologies. Sacred? Rylan's voice cut through the noise as he entered with Naira at his side. Or secret? There's a difference between respecting technology and using it to maintain artificial superiority. His quantum scanner hummed softly at his belt, still synchronized with the station's systems. Crix's scales rippled with colors that seemed to match the shifting quantum displays. My daughter and the human engineer raise an interesting point. House Zirith has long claimed their quantum technology was beyond younger species' comprehension. Yet here we are. You planned this, Lord Zirith accused, turning to face the trade baron. The bet, the vault, all of it was orchestrated. I planned a joke, Crix corrected, his scales showing amusement. I expected the human to fail spectacularly, giving us all a good laugh at both his and your expense. He gestured at the quantum displays. Instead, he succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, and now the joke's on all of us who underestimated humanity's potential. Naira's scales shifted to that deep, midnight blue as she addressed the crowd. The quantum protocols were never incomprehensible. They were just waiting for someone to see them differently. To approach them with harmony instead of dominance. Impossible. Another elder race noble shouted. Quantum mechanics requires millennia of development to truly understand. Does it? Rylan asked, pulling up a holographic interface. The quantum patterns he generated danced through the air, beautiful and complex. Or does it just require the ability to see past established assumptions? Humans haven't had quantum technology for millennia. We've had it for less than 2 centuries. But in that time, we learned to see it as a partner in creation, not a tool for control. The patterns he generated began to synchronize with the station's ambient quantum field, creating harmonies that made the elder race representatives shift uncomfortably. Their crystalline forms resonated with frequencies they had never considered possible. Look at these patterns, Naira said, her own hands joining Rylan's at the interface. Their movements synchronized perfectly, creating even more complex harmonies. The mathematics you hold sacred? Their music to human senses. The protocols you kept secret? Their dances waiting to be joined. Crix rose from his chair, his scales now showing colors Rylan had never seen before. My original bet offered my daughter's hand in marriage to this human if he succeeded in breaching the vault. A joke, meant to emphasize the impossibility of the task. His 4 eyes fixed on Rylan. But it seems the true joke was our assumption that younger species couldn't match our understanding of the universe. You cannot seriously be considering honoring this bet, Lord Zirith protested. The human has destroyed centuries of elder race control. Control that was based on deception, Crix countered. And as for honoring the bet. He looked at his daughter, who stood proudly beside Rylan, their hands still moving in concert over the quantum interface. I suspect that decision has already been made, regardless of my input. The quantum harmonies reached a crescendo, filling the lounge with patterns of light and energy that seemed to bridge the gap between elder and younger race understanding. Rylan turned to Naira, seeing in her silver eyes the same recognition of possibilities that had drawn him to quantum mechanics in the first place. Your father's joke opened the door, he said softly. But what we found beyond it was real. Her scales rippled with that deep blue that he now recognized as joy. A quantum entanglement that can't be broken? More like a dance that's just beginning. Crix's laughter filled the lounge, a sound that seemed to contain genuine delight rather than its usual mocking tone. Then let it be known across the sector. The human who danced with quantum mechanics and won my daughter's heart has also won something far greater, the right to help shape a new era of galactic cooperation. The elder race representatives muttered among themselves, but the younger species in the crowd began to show signs of excitement. The quantum displays continued to spread truth across the galaxy, but now they also showed something else, the possibility of harmony between different approaches to understanding the universe. And the greatest joke of all? Crix continued, his scales shimmering with mirth. Is that it took a human engineer with a broken quantum drive to show us that our assumptions about superiority were the real primitive thinking. As celebrations erupted throughout the station, Rylan and Naira created one final quantum harmony together. The patterns they generated spoke of possibilities, of bridges between different ways of thinking, of music where others saw only mathematics. The trade baron's joke had become a revolution, but its final punchline was something no one could have predicted. Sometimes the best way to advance civilization was to learn how to laugh at your own assumptions and dance with the impossible.